page.
Okay.
Would you like me to share the link with you?
No, that's fine.
They can just Google. They can just go to the Facebook page. It will be there. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to episode 16 of Talk at 8. Tonight we have a very interesting conversation. We have some interesting guests that will share a bit about them. And in no particular order, we know that the president is on his way. So without introducing him, we'll introduce him when he gets here. Let's go from the top. We've got Elvira, who is the Ramini, who is the Secretary General of the International Pierre de Coubertin Committee since 2018. She's the member of the CIP since 2014. She has a Master of Arts in Olympic Studies by the German Sport University. Special interest is Olympic movement during the period of Jean Antonio Samaraj presidency. Then we have someone, and Elvira, you all the way from where? Just remind us again, Elvira. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening to you. Thank you for the invitation. Good evening to all the people who are connected. I am based in Lausanne, Switzerland.
Okay, so we have an international guest and our two local guests. Starting with a young lady down at the bottom there, Raedene. Raedene has completed a high-performance artistic gymnastics for 10 years and received Western Province colors in every year. She's a qualified sports scientist who has completed a BA degree in sport, recreation, and exercise science at UWC. Raedene also completed a postgrad diploma in sport for development, graduating cum laude. And for those who don't know cum laude, Ray, good evening. Just tell us what is cum laude before I carry on.
Good evening, Alton, and good evening to everybody online. Cum laude is awarded for a 75% average and up.
Sure. So you don't just have a pretty face; you're actually clever also already.
Quite bright, Alton.
Raedene is also, and because she's so bright, she was on the dean's list, which means that she was one of the top achievers in the community and health sciences faculty, as well as a Golden Key New Member Award for Scholastic Excellence. Raedene is a master's candidate and studying sport for development with a special interest in disability. She's also has her own business called Recovery Sports Massage, and is the youth leader of the Foundation for Sport Development and Peace, and is the vice chairperson of the Youth Network for Sport and Development for Peace. Sure, Raedene, that's a mouthful there. I can vouch for the recovery. Ray and I have Ray touched me on a few occasions, Ray? A few occasions on a little trip we went on.
For 7 consecutive days, Alton.
Sure, 7 consecutive days. I remember. So Ray and I have a bit of a history. Ray was my massage therapist for 7 days when I ran 7 marathons in 7 provinces in 7 days. Ray was the lady that made sure Ray and Peter made sure that we were fed well and our bodies were taken care of. So I know Ray very well. The other person that I know very well, Professor Christo de Coubertin. Good evening. Prof. Koning specializes in public and development management, including public policy, governance, and results-based monitoring and evaluation. He's also a professor extraordinaire at the School of Public Leadership at the University of Stellenbosch. He's the principal researcher in the Case for Sport, which is a partnership with the Department of Culture Affairs and Sport. And the Case for Sport is a research concerns the socio-economic and environmental impacts of sport in the province. And a side note, Prof was also my lecturer at one or other time in my undergrad. So we have a bit of a history, Prof. How are you?
Good, Alton. It's lovely to be here this evening. Thank you for having us. You know, my title these days are only good for parking at the university. And so it goes. Thank you very much for that introduction. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Prof. Prof, maybe you can just tell us what's a professor extraordinaire? Because when someone says you're an extraordinaire, it means that you have a flair for things, but clearly you have it has a different connotation in the academic space.
No, it's just a part-time professorial position. So universities, I started being a full-time professor about 12 years ago in 2009, and then what some universities do, if you're lucky, is they offer you a 4-year professorial position, and that means you continue to teach and especially supervise PhDs and master's degree students at universities. And I've been fortunate to have that position at both UWC and Stellenbosch. Yes.
Okay, so now that we know who these guests are, let me start with the international guest first. Elvira, please, I believe from the information that I have that you're the Secretary General of the Pierre de Coubertin Committee. But before we get to that, tell us a little bit about you. Who is Elvira and what makes Elvira tick? And what's your connection to sport, please, Elvira?
Yes, well, sport is part of my life ever since I was a small child. I started training, I can say training, already at the age of 3 years old. Volleyball, figure skating, and in my primary and secondary school, I used to practice all sports that were available. Mostly I competed in volleyball matches between high schools, and all along in parallel, I trained diving. That was my favorite sport. So you see, sport was really, studies and sport were absolutely part of my daily life all the time. And then going to university, that was no longer possible to be active in sport. So at that time, I continued with jogging, fitness, and I participate in many here now in Lausanne, public races like 10 kilometers race or half a marathon race every year. So I cannot imagine my life without sport. It is a constant.
And that's what has led you to be part of the Pierre de Coubertin society. Tell us what is it and what is your involvement there?
So the International Pierre de Coubertin Committee is an institution that was created in 1975 by two Swiss gentlemen who were friends of Pierre de Coubertin in their early youth. And in the 1970s, it was already clear that the Olympic movement was going in a direction that was not really what Coubertin wanted for the Olympic movement. There was too much of exaggeration in marketing, commercialization, and going for a medal, but not for your sport. Yeah. So these gentlemen thought it was their duty as friends of Coubertin to show the real spirit that Pierre de Coubertin wanted to give to the Olympic movement, and to teach young people through sport the real values, not only of sport, but the values that are real values in the society. Therefore, with the help of the IOC, they created the International Pierre de Coubertin Committee here in Lausanne. Maybe you know that Coubertin lived in Lausanne since 1915. This is the city where he created the headquarters of the IOC. Therefore, he's a well-known personality and loved personality here in Lausanne. So our mission is based on education. We wish to show and to disseminate all the information we can about Pierre de Coubertin, his life and his work. Because we should not forget that Coubertin, those who know about Coubertin only know his aspect related to the Olympic Games and the Olympic movement. But Coubertin was much more than that. Coubertin was a journalist. He was a historian. He was a philosopher. He was a pedagogue. This is, you know that. He was a pedagogue.
Yeah.
So he produced about 60,000 pages, meaning books, essays, press articles, and he gave very many interviews. So to make this story shorter, in the beginning, this institution had the mission to make known the name of Coubertin, because in the 1970s he was no longer mentioned anywhere. So then we said, all right, he produced much material in writing. Let's put it all together. So our first, until about 1990s, our team was working on selecting writings of Coubertin to publish it, first in French and then in other languages. So this is the book. You see, these are the selected writings. This is the English translation.
It's not a small book, Elvira.
Yeah, well, these are only selected writings.
That's what I'm saying. It's not a small book, and that's only a selection of some of his work.
Exactly.
He is rumored to be the father of the Olympic movement, which most people don't even know. They only think of the Olympics as a multi-coded event that happens every 4 years. And what you're sharing now is pearls of wisdom about a whole different aspect of the Olympic movement.
Exactly. This is why your program is important, and the 9th conference was important. To talk about what really is the Olympic movement, and what is its mission in the society, and how the Olympic movement changes society for society to be a better place. How the Olympic movement can teach people of all ages. We insist on talking about young people, but I think it should be people of all ages have the right to learn about the Olympic movement and its real goal. It's not just competition and medals. It is much more than that. So
it's a whole aspect in terms of what happens before, during, and post Olympic in that 4-year cycle.
For an athlete, what is important is the training period, the years the athlete spends training with his colleague athletes, with his coaches, in his club, in his city. The competition can last a few minutes and that's it. But what is important is this phase of trainings when the athlete learns about values. Most important.
Elton, may I add something?
Yes, please.
Elton, may I add something?
Go for it, Christo. Go, Christo.
I just when can you hear me? Yes. When you say that Pierre de Coubertin is the father of the modern day Olympic Games, I want to just remark to your viewers here that the first games was held in 1896 in Athens, and before that the Olympic Games took place in ancient Olympia in Greece, around about 300 BC, before Christ. So for all of those thousands of years, there were no Olympic Games, and it was then introduced by Coubertin in 1896. And then also just a comment that Coubertin was a philosopher, an intellectual that integrated sport, education, arts, culture, and he brought what we now understand to be the philosophy of Olympism, which is really about the whole, which at the end of the day is about holism and being a complete person. Thank you.
Absolutely, Christo, and that's often the component, as I said earlier, that is not spoken about, because all you talk about is the performance on match day. So thank you, Elvira, for that overview, and Christo, from your perspective, give us a little bit of a helicopter, what I call a helicopter view, which is a highlights package of your involvement in sport and how you got involved in sport, and then we'll come to Ray.
Okay, great. Thank you, Elton. Look, I have been involved in sport as a child and I've always been active. I played squash and aerobics in my middle part of my life. I was able to play competitive squash till the age of 60. And I had to
Sure.
retire from that 2 years ago. Still played with Sian, my son, when I was 60, and that is about when COVID struck. So I'm still keeping active, but I'm not as active and successful a sportsman as the other people in this group. What happened to me 12 years ago is I was a professor in policy and monitoring and evaluation. And then the university invited me over to the sports department and the Institute for Sport and asked whether I can assist them with policy work in M&E. And there my life changed. I'm now full-time involved in sport. I apply those areas as a professional in sport internationally and locally. And I thought that sport is something that you do after hours and that you do for fun. So the last 12 years, I've been a professional in the area of sport, mainly in two areas. Yes, the one is at the university on the case for sport, and that is about the socio-economic benefits of sport and recreation in the Western Cape. As we discussed with you, Elton, we are going to have a separate program on that in future weeks. So that is not an area that I'm going to focus on this evening. I would very much like to discuss that with you and your viewers. There's a range of very interesting research results, including stories by children that I'd like to share with you, but that is maybe for another day. This evening, I am representing the Foundation for Sport Development and Peace. And what happened with us is 6 like-minded individuals got together and we said, when we turn 50 years old, we're going to volunteer half of our time as professionals on a volunteer basis to a foundation. And then we started the Foundation for Sport Development and Peace, which will be 10 years old in April next year. So we are professionals that work for half our time, and the other half of our time, we are volunteers with the Foundation for Sport Development and Peace. In short, the flagship for the foundation is the annual Sport and Peace Conference in Cape Town, and we held one last week. Elvira referred to that. And then the Foundation for Sport Development and Peace has various training programs. It also facilitates the National Pierre de Coubertin Committee that reports to the CIPC, and Elvira as our Secretary General. So the foundation are the custodians of the South African National Pierre de Coubertin Committee, and we have active schools where those programs actually run. The foundation also does training. We do a sport management course. We also do OVEP training. That's the Olympic Values Education Program of the IOC. And then we're involved in other projects like actually an anti-bullying program in the Franschhoek area. We also do legal aid in the sport area. And then perhaps our most important function is we advise the other some 45 NGOs in the Western Cape that's involved in development, but also in sport and development from a technical perspective. So we often get asked to assist with how do we design and plan a sport program, how do we design a mentorship program, how do we put a monitoring and evaluation system in place, and that is what we actually do. So that may sound a bit boring to some of your listeners because I'm not such a vivid and successful athlete, but also here this evening I'm a professional in sport and development, and I am representing the foundation this evening. The chairperson, Dr. Marion Kaim, is in Rome at the moment, in the Vatican, so she asked me to stand in for her this evening. Thanks for having me, Elton.
Thanks, Christo, and we will definitely have further conversations around the work of the foundation, and definitely we'll talk about the case of sport, which I found very interesting. The results from that, as you know, we've been involved in that, you and I, for the last 8-9 years, and we've had serious debates about the results of that. Raedene Lucas, who's
Alton David.
Ray, you are a successful athlete. You can jump, you can do flick facts, you can even do flick facts academically. Tell us a little bit more.
I kind of stumbled into sport. Like, it wasn't something that I set out for myself. So when I was 6, this group of women came to the school and they just had us do these things, like do the splits, and they tested our flexibility. And I didn't know what they were testing or what they were there for. But I participated and I gave my best. And then I got a letter to say that I've been invited to come and do some trials. This group of women was starting a high performance women's artistic gymnastics club, one of the first in Cape Town. And that's how I entered gymnastics. And my career in gymnastics was very fast paced. I mean, at high performance, I was training 4 hours a day, 6 days a week. And then the older I got, it turned into 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. So yeah, I did that for 10 years. Was also very involved in athletics. Sport has always been a part of my life. And then after high school, I took a gap year. And in that gap year, I met Raedene and Christo. And I wasn't even registered as a student yet. But I met them, and you know, it's something that Christo says about Raedene, that sometimes she just hijacks you, and you find yourself on this sport for development road. You know, I kind of just found myself there. The reason I took a gap year was because I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to study, and I didn't want to make a mistake going forward. So initially, my plan was to become a sports psychologist based off my experience as a gymnast. I realized this gap in the market in South Africa. But then when I met Raedene and Christo, the passion for development was just, it was ignited. It was crazy. And I've been involved with the foundation since 2015. And then with the Youth Network since 2018, we created the Youth Network at the Robben Island when we did our first African Youth Forum. And that was super exciting. So sport has always been a part of my life. And a lot of the things I learned in sport that I didn't know was actual things that people wrote down, that, you know, like Elvira at the CIPC is teaching people about the values in sport. And when you're involved in sport, you learn all of these things, but you don't actually know that you're learning it. So all of this opened up a whole new world to me. And I just wanted to share that. Giving back has always been something that I'm passionate about, having coming from a previously disadvantaged community. So giving back has always been a big thing. So to have sport and development be this thing that is in existence, it was huge. It was eye-opening. So that's how I kind of stumbled on with Raedene and Christo, just into the world of sport for development. Yeah.
And then you did the PG postgraduate course, and everything just continued in there from that perspective.
Yeah.
To still being academically pushing the boundaries.
Have to push the boundaries, Alton.
But people also many people don't know that your family is also big into sport. So it's not just a you thing. It's a brother and a mother.
Yes. All involved in gymnastics. Yeah.
Definitely. Which brings me to the first question. Elvira, let's start with you, and we'll go around the room. In your perspective, what would you say is the role of sport in society? Because often we have a perspective that religion often determines the roles and responsibilities, irrespective of the religion. As an example, in Christianity, in Islam, in Judaism, in a couple of others, that males are the head of the home. Males must be the chairperson. Males must do this. Males are this. From your perspective, being in Lausanne and everywhere else, traveling the world, how do you see the role of sport in society, and from your organization's perspective?
Yes, well, sport is for everyone, for people of all ages, for men, women, children, parents, grandparents. It is for everyone. Okay. Through sport, society becomes a better place. Why? I would like to state a wording which I very much like and am convinced from a speech of a former president of the IOC, Dr. Rogge. He gave a very good comparison of how sport affects the society through the education of youth. And I read, this is what he said. Sport can teach you to respect the rules. Sport can teach you to respect your opponent. Sport can allow you to integrate in the society. Sport can teach you to develop your skills. Sport brings you joy and pride. Sport gives you identity. Sport allows you to understand those who are different from you. I think this says everything. When you educate young people through these values, the society has to change.
Yeah.
Therefore,
definitely, and
the education through sport, it is really based on Coubertin's philosophy, which we are trying to put into simple words so that people can understand the effects of the values of sport. And these are all the values of sport. Therefore, sport is the best tool for education. And I personally am convinced because I have been there and I have done that. And sport was the most important element in my life. Have I answered?
Absolutely, and you've encapsulated all the different. Yes, definitely. You've encapsulated a large component of sport. The other side that you've not touched on, which us as spectators often see, is the heart.
Oh, what happened? Electricity?
But then let's just stay with him for a moment and see if he comes back on.
Okay.
Keep your smiles on, colleagues. I think this is still live.
Yeah, well, yeah, I could see he was getting blocked, the image. Oh, there he is. I know.
Yeah, let's hope it's not electricity and just a connection problem that he'll come back on.
Oh, wait. Okay. Hello.
Everybody there? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
we wait.
we're waiting.
Okay. I don't know what happened there. Sorry. Okay, so Elvira, yes, you touched on respect, rules, opponents, integration, skills, pride, identity, but there's other components that that one also has to take into account. Unity, commitment, dedication, which sport teaches on a whole different level. Raedene, from your perspective, how would you see the role of sport in society?
Sport. Sorry, Elvira, go for it.
Go, Elvira, go.
Did you ask me or?
No. We're moving to Ray. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry.
No problem. So to me, sport is this magical little place where you could go and everything about you that is different from other people doesn't exist anymore. And I think that is the power that sport has. I mean, yes, there are negative aspects of sport, but if we're looking only at the positive, that is essentially what it is. Sport has saved people's lives just based on this magical place that you can go just on the field where it's just about participation and talent and having fun. And that is what I think sport in society is. It also provides this platform for people to challenge unjust societal norms, like you guys mentioned earlier on about how religion can sometimes influence the role of individuals in society, but sport will give you the platform to challenge those norms that sometimes people are forced to play. They're forced to play these roles in society, but in sport you can step out of that and be whoever you want to be. And so I think sport has an integral role in challenging societal norms.
Absolutely right, and I see Dr. David Medilek is online. He and I and I'm sure Christo as well have first-hand experience of during the apartheid era where we were called traitors at points because we sided and played in different teams in different aspects of sport. Elvira, in the old days, the different race groupings had to play amongst themselves and not move into different skin colors across boundaries. And that's one of the ways that we kind of separated and to a degree almost broke down from a sporting perspective based on what Ray's saying, breaking the boundaries in trying to bridge the gaps. So yes, Ray, you're right. It has that, sport has that power to do that. Christo, from your perspective, how would you see the role of sport?
Yeah, I think this role of sport is huge. I so much agree with Raedene when she says that she gets excited about sport and development. Sport is not about high performance only. It's about development. And in a country like ours, which is a developmental state, not a capitalist democracy like Great Britain or the United States of America, in our country, development is at the heart of everything that we do. So a developmental approach is important. And what sport can and does contribute to development is huge. So, there's really two levels. The one level, I find it very interesting that your program normally focuses on the impact of the individual. So the individual athlete will provide evidence to say, this is how it has changed my life. Often what I'm involved in are the more macro impacts. So in the case of sport also, I want to say to your listeners that sport doesn't only impact on the individual, it impacts on communities, it impacts on the economy, it impacts on sport as a social sector. So some people think that sport is what you watch on the TV on Saturdays, but including ministers. But sport is an economic sector in its own right. It makes more money than tourism. Sport is a social sector in its own right. So on the economic side, it provides economic growth, 9 billion rand per annum in the Western Cape. It provides job opportunities. 60,000 people in the Western Cape are employed through sport. On the social side, it impacts on health. So there's major evidence, and UCT have done a study to show that your hospitalization costs are reduced when your people are active, your general population are active. Then sport impacts on education, the whole issue and the debate about physical education at school, and UNESCO's recent study on quality physical education. Then sport impacts on social cohesion and social inclusion. Some of the issues that you touched upon now, including gender equity, but also including all vulnerable groups in sport. And there's a whole set of other issues that I don't want to waste time on now, but including community safety and other areas where sport as a social sector, also in social welfare, where it acts as a safety net, plays a major role. And then the third leg, as in sustainability, is the role that sport plays in impacting on sustainable development, both in terms of the production and goods of production and use of goods and services, but also climate change. And climate change, when we have time, sport both impacts on climate change and makes it worse or better, and at the same time, climate change impacts on sport. So later when we discuss COVID, I also want to discuss with you the impact that the drought have had on us. So my response to you, Elton, is sport has a major macro impact as an economic and as a social sector as well, not only at an individual level. Please allow me to just add that at the individual level, which is a very important area, at the moment I'm doing a study for UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund. And what we're trying to do is develop a measuring instrument in monitoring and evaluation to assess whether the youth, and in this instance it's 300 schoolgirls in Gauteng, whether their psychosocial behavior actually changes as a result of a sport intervention. So psychosocial meaning the impact on the individual and the impact social as on the human as a group. So on the psycho side, we want to know, does self-esteem improve and how can we measure that? Does trust of the individual improve? Does commitment improve? Does discipline improve? Also to attend school. And on the social side, we're interested to know, does communication improve? Does relationships improve? On the Cape Flats, we have a special problem between boys and girls that don't often communicate, and then we're surprised when people have problems in later life. So the psychosocial behavioral changes at the individual level is huge, and I hope we can also spend time on that. So sorry to take your time. This is a topic where once you get me going, I have a lot to say. The impact of sport on development is huge. Thank you.
Absolutely, Christo, and Elvira, go Elvira, and then
I would just like to add one more element. Sport eliminates prejudices, because in sport, like Red said, you are showing your best, regardless your color, your height, your weight, your nationality. All that is eliminated. You are there representing yourself and what you're capable of. Therefore,
absolutely, Elvira, but you're not only there representing yourself, you're representing the entire, what I call a tribe. Everybody that's got you to that point. It's not just about you at that start line. It's about your aunt or your uncle sitting at home cheering for you, your grandmother that, as people would say, is praying for you, the guy who drove you to the airport. It's an entire entourage that got you to the start. To Christo's point is, Christo, you're right. Over the last couple of weeks, all we've spoken about is the individual impact, but sport has a significant impact in society. You look at Discovery Health as one example, with the Vitality and all these other medical systems that have a rewards program for you to being active. Why? Because you're then able to decrease the medical bill and the cost by being active, and it's simple things like that we don't see in the big picture. We just say, oh, we got to be part of Discovery because we're going to get points, we're going to get a discounts in this and that. But the long-term effect is they want to create a healthier society. Yet, sadly to say, in South Africa, our sports budget is, I think, 9th or 10th out of the total government spend for the year. And if we flip that around, some of those other components may have a saving, as an example, in a health space. I mean, we haven't even spoken about if people are healthy, there'll be less crime, there'll be less people doing all kinds of things, less heart attacks, etc., less obesity. And sport has the power to do that, which we don't even engage on. So yes, sport as from an individual right into family, into communities, right into international level. Guys who are watching, you're welcome to join the conversation. Give us your comments in the chat, and definitely we'll raise it.
Elton.
Yes, Christo.
Now I have something to add. I think this discussion that we've just had is incomplete if we don't also remark and observe that sport has a major impact on value systems. So when we talk values, there's the Olympic values, which is excellence, as in high performance sport, joy of effort, respect, fairness, and then the issue of balanced body, mind, and spirit, which is also where Pierre de Coubertin takes us. So the issues around values are huge because sport provides us with a practice on the field and off the field as to what those value systems to us mean. I also find a special meaning in the 6 principles of corporate governance that the Association of Summer Olympic Associations propose to federations. They say that the principles are democracy. Now, sport builds that if we have democratic sport federations and clubs, and if we promote through our sport practices that, then we're promoting democracy. We're promoting transparency and accountability through sport organizations and teach our people to do that with respect to general life as well. Then there's the issue of sport integrity, which has a very close interface to the whole issue of values. Are we ethical? And are we acting from a value-driven point of view? Is it values that drive us? Then there's the issue of solidarity and development. Do we stand together, Ubuntu, and development? Are we using sport as an instrument for development and not only high performance? And then there's the question of internal controls. So forgive me for going there, but I've just wanted to highlight the importance of values in sport and the fact that sport is this vehicle that brings about value changes as well. Thank you.
Absolutely, Christo, and thanks for raising that, because sport is and as Raedene called it, it's a place, it's a happy place where a huge portion of our society gravitates to for pleasure, purely almost from an escapism perspective, where they move away from getting away as an escape from everyday humdrum, everyday society. But you're right, it comes with its perils, it comes with all the politics, it comes with all the drama, the lack of funding, but there's lots of positives other than that, which are the things that we've spoken about, Ray, from your perspective, how would you say that having understanding all of this and being part of this, when COVID hit, it knocked all sport in South Africa particularly, and I'm sure across the world, how did that impact and you and what you do? But also coming to what Christo was saying earlier about the psychosocial, because COVID has a significant impact in how people have responded to COVID. Number one, we've lost a huge component in terms of institutional knowledge, because no one thought that I'm using simple example, a guy who has been the chairman of a running club for 20 years has now suddenly passed away as a result of COVID. All that institutional history of that club is now lost. How has it affected you and the work that you do, Ray?
Well, COVID was very difficult, especially on the youth network, in terms of we couldn't run any programs during that time because of hard lockdown. So in the most difficult time that people were going through, we couldn't even reach them to provide any kind of developmental program to give them some kind of relief in their day. So I think that the lack of physical interaction was just very difficult in that sense, because in order to run a developmental program and in order for it to have the impact that you wanted to have, I mean, there's nothing better than face-to-face. Technology can bring us together, but it does not beat the actual thing, So we had to wait. We definitely had to wait for the levels to reduce and the restrictions to come down. And then when we did, we ran a couple of programs in Hanover Park, but we were so limited because obviously we couldn't allow just anybody to come in. There had to be a strict amount of youth in the venue, and all these limitations. It was very difficult. And in Hanover Park, when we were running the program, the youth development program, loud music was playing because we were doing a bit of Zumba in the morning. And because this loud music was playing in the church, it attracted so many young kids in the community that were just walking past, And gosh, because of this limitation on the venues and the amount of people we were allowed to have in the venue, we had to turn people away, and that's really, oh gosh, my heart broke. That's not something you want to do, especially in the middle of a program. You want to be able to have people just show up and enjoy. So in that sense, it was very difficult for the youth network to kind of be with the community and in support with them. But yeah, we definitely did our best to overcome that by obviously sticking to the rules and trying to give as much as we could, keeping the team as small as we can, just so that we can make sure we have more youth groups even, because the team counts as people. So yeah, very difficult thing to overcome, but I think it was also a great time a lot of young people to come in and take a leadership role in terms of using technology for development in any aspect, not even in sport alone. So yeah, COVID, very interesting time. had its negatives and its positives, definitely.
Definitely, and I think, Ray, just on that, a lot of people don't understand that how this whole percentage came into being. That they would say you're only allowed to have 50%. And I had this
Mm.
conversation last week where someone said, "How did they determine 50%?"
Yeah.
Alvira, for your understanding, in South Africa, we have what's called a population certificate for every public venue. So the fire department comes into the fire and rescue service comes into a venue, and they look at the venue and they look at how many exits there are, and how many seating capacity, and then they determine how many people is safe to be in the venue, and then they issue what's called the population certificate. So during COVID, we were told at different points you're allowed 50% capacity, 60%, and was based on the population certificate, because most people didn't have a clue, and still today, many people still don't understand how do they count the 50% and 60%.
Mm.
So that's how it came about. Alvaro, from your perspective, how did COVID affect you and everything around your activities? I mean, being in
Well,
Europe is very different to South Africa.
yeah, well, evidently COVID was a shock to everyone. At least our generations
Yeah.
have never gone through something like that. So it was a big shock. Personally, I was lucky. I did not get it, but
Mm.
it is still going on. So I'm just saying, so far I did not get it, but you never know.
Yeah.
But I'm very, very sad for so many people. So sad. It was terrible to watch the news,
Mm.
really. Since we were all locked in our houses, um, we had a very useful program every morning on TV of exercise, offering exercise, physical education teachers who were
Okay.
doing programs for people of different ages. So
Mm.
at least it made you move a little bit, and
Yeah.
you could repeat the exercise during the day. What my experience, because of the profile of my work, was very positive in the sense, even though we were at home, working from home, our committee achieved a lot. Thanks to the modern technology, all our projects were carried on with success, and even better than we thought. We gained a lot of time, and some of our projects that were meant to be published books or exhibitions were actually presented on the internet.
Mm.
Therefore, we gained the advantage of offering to great many people the information and the knowledge of the results of our work. Therefore, professionally, and I'm limiting myself to the profile of the work that we do,
Yes.
but COVID did not disturb our activities. As a matter of fact, it brought us closer because we had all our meetings on the internet, not maybe on daily basis, but more often than we normally did when we had meetings in person. Therefore,
Yeah.
it even brought us closer. I mean, I would like to stress this moment because it sounds incredible, but this is our experience. So I say thank you. This special circumstance of sanctions really helped us find a new way of doing, a new way of management, a new way of
Yeah.
producing books, written material, a new way to communicate with people, a new way of doing, which is great. For us, it was success, really. Therefore, we have, for example, already in spring 2020, the National Pierre de Coubertin Committees of Latin America created a center to work together as one team. Thanks to the internet, they are one team. They are 12 committees, but they work as one. And they have produced incredible heritage. not only in writing, in written material, but also in conferences. Conferences at all levels of primary, secondary school, conferences at the level of universities, and conferences offered to journalists to learn more about the Olympic movement. So, you see, I would like to underline that this was a very positive side for us, even though there were sanctions, but at the level professionally, for us, it was good experience. It was good experience. Now, what I noticed, the bad side, I would like to mention just in a few words. When I looked around me, I could see on daily basis changes in the environment, in the nature. Although Switzerland is a country that pays attention and takes care of nature very much, all of a sudden we saw great differences in fields of flowers that we have never seen before, bushes that we have never seen before, birds that were all of a sudden were flying freely because men were not around to frighten them. In this lake, we know there is fish, but we never see it. But at this time, when there were no boats and no swimmers, fish would come to the shore and they were swimming on the surface. It was just unbelievable. So what struck me was I really saw with my own eyes on daily basis changes in the nature, which tells me how much we are destroying nature. So this was very, I was very surprised to see that. Very surprised. I didn't think that we were so destructive, but we are. Yeah. This is
absolutely, and there's there are many reports of that across the world, not only with but even in South Africa, there's lots of stories of aspects that's
I think
because now they were free to roam. There was no human interaction. The fact that now exactly what you're saying, people now have internet, and because people are forced to work at home, more people have fiber. So it makes life easy for many people now to have online meetings, which we didn't have before. More people have fiber. So from that perspective, yes. From a negative perspective, there's the psychological disadvantages, how it's affected people. Christo, you want to talk a bit about how it's affected you and the psychological aspect very shortly or briefly?
Yes, I do. I very much agree with Raedene on the negative.
You want to share
Can
from
you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Elton, I'm saying that I'm in agreement with the previous two speakers on the negative consequences of COVID. I also want to remind our viewers that in 2018 and 2019, we had a severe drought in the Western Cape, that we were down to 20 litres per person, and that some sport types, especially aquatics, closed, and also those using green fields. Netball for girls in the young ages closed because there were no abolition facilities. So 2018, 2019, severe impact on sport federations in the Western Cape, followed by COVID 2020 and 21. That's 4 years, not only 2 years. Yeah. And I said to the conference last week, Elvira, you'll remember then, I'm still surprised that we can compete competitively internationally in the Olympics and in other areas. And what I'm saying also applies to the Southern Hemisphere as a whole. The drought was also in Latin America and in Australia. So we're really talking about 4 years. But Elton, on your question, what I would like to highlight are actually 3 positive things that I've seen happen as a result of COVID. The first one is, in my view, there was a rediscovery of the value of being physically active. So even people that were not active in sport previously, once they realize what it feels like to just sit in your study for 24 hours per day and so many weeks, they started finding excuses to walk around the block at night. And previously they didn't. So people that were not involved in sport and that were not active, I'm not even talking about sports people because they know, but actually found out how important it is to be physically active. So that's the first point I want to make. And I think that is a good point for sport and recreation, because we go through COVID, we got more people involved now in understanding how important it is and what pleasure physical activity can bring and how important it is for well-being. And let me compliment you, because you're one of the very few people I saw on my Facebook with programs in keeping people fit every day on a daily basis. I saw Elton with his physical activity programs doing exercise for all ages. And so COVID opened that up in us. Elton Davids didn't do that previously, but during COVID, it triggered you to go online and get us active, okay? So that is my first point. The second one, I have the privilege of sitting in meeting all 147 the Western Cape Sport Federations every year, because in January and February, I'm part of the trilateral meetings, as you know. And why I'm saying this is what we've heard from federations was that federations improved a lot by in terms of their ability to use technology, to meet virtually, to meet like we are meeting now, and to become comfortable with that technology. So I actually think that the interaction and the ability to use online technology is much closer to sport federations now than what it was previously. What sport federations also told us is those sport federations that continue to have contact with their members during COVID was able to quickly mobilize again and be active after COVID to when they were allowed. Those sport federations that didn't speak to their membership at all and just let it go, those are sport federations that lost major members. Allow me to say football, allow me to say chess that was school-based, and I can mention others. But those federations that kept on interacting with their members, they were successful at continuing to mobilizing a larger number of athletes. You know, they were, for example, showing international videos and then analyzing them in amateur wrestling, for example. They would have programs every week where together the trainers, the coaches, the players would analyze video games online. Or they would have other type of activities to replace the physical activity. Elton, and then third and lastly, what we also saw, you know, in normal times like we have now, sport federations are so busy with active sport programs and coaching and exercising, they hardly as volunteers get time to organize themselves, to do proper strategic planning, to review the constitution, to develop a gender equity policy, to develop a safeguarding policy. And this may just sound like paperwork to you, but from a governance perspective, what I saw is many of our federations used this time period as an opportunity to sit at home and actually redraft those documents. And they're not only documents, they're active policies, and they were doing so together in teams. So I celebrated that I saw an improvement in the quality of constitutions, policy, strategy, and actually the planning that went into federations during that period. Many federations that I can mention to you, like golf in Eden, for example, made tremendous advances in this period. And so those are three advantages, positive things about the COVID period that I would take away and that I learned from.
Absolutely, Christo, and there are many more. And often people only focus on the negative component. As some people would say, we've lost lots of members. The running club I belong to is down by 40%, and running membership in Cape Town, as an example, in club membership is down by at least 40%, because people now, exactly what you're saying, are now recreational more than they are competitive. Because during COVID, they realized, but my kids are also at home, so they've taken to the park, taken to Newlands Forest, gone for a walk, and from that perspective, to Elvira's point earlier, sport has now changed people's perspective, and broken the prejudice that it's only an adult thing where we play sport, where it's now a community of sport activity. And then, Christo, to your point about technology, you're right. Most people now have untapped fiber to a degree in South Africa as a result of COVID, because we were forced to work at home. Um, I was able to do the exercises twice a day for almost 45 minutes at a time because I had fiber. Exactly what you're saying, because I was forced to work at home. Prior to that, I lived off a little Wi-Fi dongle, and now things have changed. You know, so definitely there's an advantage. Elvira, yeah, you want to say something?
Yes, at the practical level, I would like to add another example, because we were not allowed to use public transport for a long time.
Yeah.
So there are very many places that are open for cyclists. In Lausanne, in the last 2 years, they have changed so many streets. Some are saying 80% of the city has been changed to allow cyclists to use cycling in everyday life. So it is a new habit. Yes, there were many cyclists before, but now the number is multiplied by a lot. Therefore, there are very many new areas for cyclists everywhere in all parts of the city. That was one of the effects of COVID.
Absolutely, and commuting is growing as well. But there's other components to commuting which let me not get started, because that's a very as Christo and Raedene will know, that's a very passionate component of my life, commuting. But we traditionally we get to 9 o'clock and we've come to the end. Okay, with your indulgence, can we move for another 10-15 minutes? Elvira?
May I just transmit to you a message of apology from President Evele. Finally, he could not join us, and he apologizes for that. So just to know that he's very sorry he could not attend.
His apologies accepted, ma'am. Tell him he has an open invitation to come and come and share some of his thoughts with us at any point. Any Wednesday evening with advance notice, definitely we'll make space for him. Please convey that to him.
Only advance notice, Alton.
Yes, I mean, really? It's not a lastminute.com thing. People know in advance. Like, you know in advance you're going to be here tonight, you know? You're going to blow dry your hair, all of those kinds of things, you know? So with your indulgence, part of the conversation that I'd like to have is, and Christo, you touched on it earlier, is the technology component. Previously, I attended your flagship conference, which was a physical component, and this year the Foundation for Peace, for Sport, Peace and Development presented a virtual component. So I just want to spend a few minutes, and I'll put up part of the agenda. It's just to have an overview from each of you, your thoughts on the conference, number one, and number two. Elvira, particularly from your perspective, how did you perceive the South African context in terms of how we viewed sport and its components versus some of the other aspects that, or the other countries and perspectives that you experienced? And we'll start in reverse. So let's go with Christo, then we'll go Ray, and then Elvira, you can put it together for us.
With pleasure. Okay.
Thanks. Christo, from your perspective?
Yes, I'm going to keep it short and not bore you with detail. I think the high point, this is the third time we have a virtual conference, and as you say, previously it was live. So this was the 9th conference. Next year we will have a live conference again at the waterfront, and everybody is invited. I may add that this is the only sport conference that I know that is for free. And that has been for free the last 9 years, because we never want to exclude anybody. So we say, if you can, from Khayelitsha, hike, or from Mitchell's Plain, or wherever you are, and get yourself to the conference, we will feed you and you'll be able to attend the conference. So I would just like to say that what stood out for me at the conference, and also in previous years, are the different stakeholders that we're able to bring to the same table to enter into dialogue. So the NGO, the foundation, has been able to get the Barry Hendrickse there, who's the chairperson of SASCOC, the Minister of Sport and Recreation, various government officials, an international audience such as Elvira and them. So the highlight to me was really that we were able to gather a group of international and South African stakeholders that could freely exchange ideas on sport development and peace. On the second day, on the first and the second day, we also have commissions. And commissions are smaller groups where we afford everybody the opportunity to take part in the debate, and then we publish that. So the results of the conference will also be made available to everybody. But I would like to say the one thing that was special to me about this year's conference, last week's conference, was the partnerships and the emphasis on cooperation, and that we could and should not be trying to do SDP on our own, but that sport and development is a collective effort, and that partnerships is key. So when we say that, we mean government, we mean civil society, and civil society includes NGOs, it includes sport federations, and it also includes private sector. So my key message and feedback is that partnerships and cooperation is key in SDP. Thank you.
Absolutely, Christo, because all of those tying together. Without civil society, government can't function. Without government, we won't have a people to work with. And unless those partnerships are clear and transparent, and everybody knows their role and responsibility, it makes life easy going forward from a corporate governance perspective as well.
Yes. And in South Africa, we had to have a cooperative governance system that's very special. It's very different from elsewhere in the world. And it's maybe one of the democratic advantages that we had since we learned from apartheid. So from SASCOC on the national level, from the Western Cape Sports Council and DCAS, down to the local level with municipalities and federations, there is an interaction between the governmental component and the civil society component. Governance is really about the relationship between state and civil society and the mechanisms that we have for us to deal with each other. And in our country, that's very special. We should one day spend an evening just on that. Thanks, Elton.
Yeah, but also the reporting structure up and down, and the transparency of that, because that's another component. Ray, from your perspective, how did you find the conference this year? And your take homes for you?
The conference was very exciting. Whenever the conference comes around, I'm always excited. It's a highlight. It's definitely a highlight on the calendar, you know. But one of the exciting things that happened for me at the conference this year was that I got to facilitate one of those commissions, and that was fun. That was a lot of fun. Normally I'm the note taker, you know, so the development is happening. But yeah, a lot of robust conversation came out of the conference, and from the participants at the conference, and a lot of conversation around mentorship, values, like Christo mentioned earlier, and disability was something that came up quite often. One of the people at the conference mentioned how disability should be at the essence of sport for development. That it's something that we should discuss as sport for development as a whole, and not just the separate entity of sport for development. So there was a lot of interesting topics that came up. A lot of people had some good concerns about how we can inspire the youth to continue volunteering, because it's becoming something that a dying activity, you know, like young people aren't interested in volunteering anymore. How can we inspire them to continue? And what, as us as mentors, what can we do to bring that about? So it was definitely very exciting having to be a part of the conversation in a leadership aspect. Yeah, and just learning from everyone. My favorite thing about the conference always is the sharing of information that takes place. There's always this abundance of information that you leave with, which you wouldn't know if you didn't attend. And the networks that you make at the conference is always strong networks. So that was definitely a highlight for me when it came to the conference. Yeah.
Thanks, Ray. You touched on two important points. And we've debated this in one of our previous episodes about volunteerism. Often, volunteerism in the past used to be what I call sweat equity, because people volunteer their time, their effort, their commitment for no financial gain in sport. And that's a dying breed purely because the cost of living has become so expensive that people don't have the money. Previously, I'd get in my car and go and coach across town at no cost because I could afford to. Now times are tough. Now you can't. Now you got to charge people, or you can't go to every meeting because you don't have petrol money. And therefore, from a volunteering perspective, is it volunteering when you give someone a stipend for petrol? You know, does it become, it's those kinds of nuances, Christo, which I think we need to have a conversation about, definitely. But definitely I agree from a disability perspective, and there the chairperson of Cape Town Tennis agrees. Disability, the youth and women should be a priority in sport, which was integral to what your conference was about, definitely. Elvira, from your perspective, how did you find the conference, and did the comments and the conversations that were had from a South African perspective, how did it sit with you from an international perspective?
Yes, well, I would like to add to Red's opinion that conferences are always occasions when we learn a lot.
Yeah.
We learn from each other, and we learn we get a quantity of information that otherwise we would not have available so easily.
Yeah.
So from the point of view of the International Pierre de Coubertin Committee, the institution that was invited to attend the conference, we can only say we welcome such conferences. They're gratifying and they're a source of information and education. And these conferences always touch people who attend, but also a great number of other people who are connected as perhaps observers. And therefore the message of the good side and the bad side, the problems and the success are always available to great many people. The messages of the Olympic movement, or the messages of sport, the sporting institutions, or the institutions that directly or indirectly deal with sport, pass on the message to a greater society. So I really enjoyed, and I had the great honor to announce the translation of one of the books of Pierre de Coubertin into Swahili language on this occasion.
Awesome.
So awesome. I was very happy. I was really happy to be able to do that, because it was work that started precisely because I attended one conference of the International Olympic Academy, where I met the person who translated, who made the translation into Swahili, and with whom we will have more projects in the future. Therefore, I can only congratulate the organizers for the excellent conference, excellent discussions, and a very good program.
Thanks, Elvira. I mean, the translation component is a very tricky component, because you need to be able to capture the essence of the conversation, or the written piece into that language, and you need to get the permission of, in South Africa, often the tribal leaders who agreed to the wording. I know from when they translated the cricket book into Xhosa, it evoked a huge conversation in terms of the wording that was used. How did you find the dialogue and the perspective of South Africans? Is it similar to what you encounter across other parts of the world?
Well, you see, the Olympic movement unites people. We speak the same language, regardless whether we're in Sweden or in South Africa.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Definitely.
We're all united by the same goals.
Sport and music unites people like nothing else can.
Exactly.
That's my view. Definitely. In closing, Christo, let's start with you. Why would, I mean, you've got a range of different experiences in sport. Why would I, Alton Davids, if you were having a conversation with me, what would you tell me to get me into sport and keep me into sport? What would be the reasons?
Well, I would just argue with you that sport is a major factor in your well-being, and that sport brings about that balanced well-being that we all seek in life. You know, Plato, the philosopher with Aristotle, in many years ago, said the most important thing in life is happiness. And maybe if we ask around the table and other people too, a lot of people will agree that the ultimate in life is being happy, is happiness. And if we ask what is happiness, happiness is about well-being. And there's areas like spiritual well-being, there's areas like social well-being, there's areas like emotional well-being, and then there's physical well-being. And if you're not healthy, and if you're not fit, and if you don't feel physically well, your well-being in all of these other areas that I've mentioned will take a dive. So sport is really key to well-being. It's key to you being happy, and happiness. And sport is integral. It is part of who we are. So I would argue that, yes.
Absolutely, Christo, and you've touched on a very important very important point, that when we coach, we don't just coach the athlete. We coach every component that the athlete brings with them to the training venue.
Yes, yes,
What they had at home, the home situation, and often, and Raedene can attest to this. When you coach a kid in a disadvantaged community, you first need to make sure that they're fed before they can actually participate in sport.
yes,
You can't feed or teach or coach a hungry child. You know,
yes,
so I
yes,
definitely agree with you. Raedene, from
yes.
your perspective, in closing, what would you say is why would you tell me to play sport?
Well, with mental health issues being on the rise as a result of COVID-19 and everything, that would definitely be something I raise with you. I agree with Christo that sport has this holistic wellness, um, and it can help you heal. If I'm talking to youth from a disadvantaged community, I would emphasize the safe space that sport provides. Um, it can remove you from negative social activities and give you an opportunity for personal development. Um, yeah, there's a lot of values that you can learn in sport, and that's something that I would also highlight if I'm talking to you, Alton. Come learn my values here of discipline and excellence.
But Ray,
Yeah, that's
you
me.
touched an interesting component, because often we negate the impact that a sports person has on his community, because we are role models by virtue of the fact that we participate and we have excelled to a degree. So the person who hasn't excelled will look up to Ray and say, if she can be a Western Province gymnast every year for 10 years, what stops me from being it? And we create those channels of role models without even realizing it, just by virtue of us going through our own routine, you know. And linked to that is the mentorships thing that you spoke about earlier. Inadvertently, you a mentor, whether you like it or not, just by being who you are and what you're doing. You're already mentoring people to not physically taking the hand and saying, now this is the next step, but virtually
Yeah,
or them just following your path.
yeah, yeah. Definitely puts you in a role to inspire others and pave the way for others. Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. Elvira, from your perspective, what would be the value of sport to an individual and in life generally?
Yeah. Okay. So if I have to convince a young person, a child or a young person, a teenager, I would say that
Yeah.
sport will teach them why the rules exist and how to respect them. I would tell them that maybe they have skills which they are not aware of. Through sport, through practice, they will discover parts of their character, of their physical possibilities, mental possibilities that they didn't know before. I would also tell them that sport would make them proud of themselves. When you achieve a new movement in your sport or a new way of practicing your sport, you're proud of yourself because you learned something new with success. I would also tell them that that respect is very important. Respect those who are better than you and respect yourself for what you are doing and for what you have achieved. So it's respect in different directions. And for elderly people, I would say, instead of going to a medical doctor, go and do some sport. You will not need a doctor if you do sport.
What I call life preservation, because through sport you have lots of health benefits, decrease heart condition, high blood, hypertension, all of those components which we spoke about earlier to a degree. But definitely, Elvira, I think one of the biggest advantages in sport is the skill development. Not everybody can be an Olympic sensation. And for me, the person who's number 4, ranked number 4, number 5, there's no reason why they can't excel as an sports administrator, as a coach, as a technical official. And if we look at it from that perspective, there are lots of opportunities, to what Christo was saying earlier, job opportunities in that space. Doesn't mean because you're not the number 1 athlete, you can't still be involved in sport. You can be an academic like Raedene and Christo, and still add value in the sports space. So definitely, I think there's a big role that sport can play in people's lives without necessarily being a physical component. So in closing, I'm going to give you each 2-3 minutes just to round off any thoughts that you have. Is there any volunteers who'd like to go first? No volunteers.
Yes, Elton,
I'd like to continue the conversation for another 2 hours, but I'm cognizant of constraints. Yeah, so Christo, let's start with you, Christo. I know you enjoy conversation. I know you enjoy chatting. So can you round off from your perspective what this was like and some of the learnings that we can take from here going forward?
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Elton. I've been following your program for a few weeks now. I'm not on all the time, but I've been following the program with keen eyes. I think this program plays a major role in sharing the experiences in the province and with your viewers as to what sport can do for the individual, Today was special to me in the sense of we went international. It's so lovely to have Elvira here. Yep. And also we discussed macro issues today. In other words, how sport impacts also beyond the individual. And that is something that I will take home today and that I hope that we will discuss again in the program in future. I'm also, I want to say that in the foundation, we've started the youth network, and there's about close to a dozen people like Raedene that have developed and put themselves out there over the last 10 years. And my celebration are the youth. My celebration are people that can take over from those of us that are sort of not stepping out, but realizing our own limitations at this point in time. I must say that I have a tremendous confidence and trust in the youth. I always say to my son and to his friends and students that I meet that young people today at 21, at 25, at 30 are much more sorted out than I was at that age. I have such a trust in the young people's values and who they are and how they do it. So I just want to close off there by saying to Raedene, thanks for being here as well. Thanks for what you guys do as a youth network, and our future lies in the youth. Thank you, Elton, to you as well for offering this program.
Thanks, Christo. Definitely, and I agree with you. that there is hope. There is hope in this country, not only in this country but in the world. If we use mentorship as a model to grow sustainable growth, unless we take the hands, we're never going to get there. If you look at our generation, we standing on the shoulders of giants who have fought apartheid to get us to have an open democracy. And from that perspective, we need to be the next generation to take the hands of the youth and catapult them into the next space. Talking about youth, Ray, in South Africa, the ANC Youth League is until 35. So I won't ask your age, but I'm sure you're still youth.
Well under 35. So yeah, I'm still in the youth group.
Okay, so you can still be part of the youth league. That's okay.
Yeah, and I can be a cool youth. I can be a cool young person, not too old yet.
Okay, cool. What are some of the take-homes out of today?
This experience was lots of fun. Definitely lots of fun. I love having conversations about the things that I'm passionate about. We spoke about a lot of important things, and if there are any youth watching, when Alton introduced me and he told me that is a mouthful, if you are young, it should be a mouthful. You should be throwing yourself into every opportunity that you can so that you can learn as much as you can. We have the opportunity to have access to education. So not taking that opportunity would be just disappointing, especially with the development that this country has made. The doors are open. So yeah, this is a lot of fun having discussions. I mean, I'm sitting with Elvira and Christo. Yeah, and you, Alton. Let's never forget you. Yeah, we definitely learned a lot in terms of the different careers in sport. That's also something that young people are not fully aware of. All of the different careers that sport can offer. A lot of us think that it's limited to personal training or biokinetics or physiotherapy, when in actual fact there are so many different avenues. Like I learned about sport for development, and here I am. So definitely open as many doors as you can, because it's never ending. It's infinite. The opportunities are there. We must grab them. So I would like to thank you, Alton, and you, Christo, for paving the way for me. Yeah, I wouldn't be here without you. Yeah, thank you.
Definitely. And Ray, I often use the analogy of opportunity as someone with me like me with no hair and take a little bit of your hair and stick it in the front of my head. And unless you grab the opportunity when it's there, when it's past you, you can't grab it once it's past, because it's gone. So while the opportunities are there, people need to grab it with both hands and appreciate it and use it to the utmost ability to empower themselves. And that's what and that's the only way we're gonna grow. Definitely, 100%.
Time to lead. It's the youth's time to lead.
Absolutely. Elvira, from your perspective, how was this experience for you? What are some of the take-homes for yourself?
Well, considering that I represent the International Pierre de Coubertin Committee, I would like to say a few words, dedicate a few words to the two institutions in South Africa we collaborate with, the National Pierre de Coubertin Committee of South Africa and the Foundation for Sport Development and Peace.
Yep.
I would like to congratulate your teams, the two institutions. You're an excellent example of generosity of the Olympic spirit. I have been working with you at least since 2018. Therefore, my words are very sincere and concrete. You are an inspiration power, not only in your country, but also in the neighboring countries. You're creating a rich heritage for present and future generations. You have worked very hard to prepare your schools to join the network of Pierre de Coubertin schools. They have already participated at the Pierre de Coubertin International Youth Forums on several occasions, and your students were always well prepared and were among the best ones out of 150 participants. You're fulfilling a very important mission, which is at the same time our mission. Therefore, we're walking in the same path with the same goals. The Olympic values are now a part of your culture, at least since 2018, when your Coubertin committee was recognized. You have already created a rich heritage, and I really wish you every success. I thank Elton for his program. And previously, I suggested to Elton that maybe he should include more press people and media to learn about everything that we already know and to learn what you have already created. Your heritage must be known, because this heritage will stay forever. It cannot disappear. And as I always ask people, do you have somebody who is writing your history? You have done so much. You're galloping. Your activities are extraordinary. So who is writing your history? This is my final word.
Thank you, Elvira, for your words. Say again, sorry?
I say you have to think about your history.
Absolutely. And during COVID, I started that conversation where I journaled and did interviews with a few people. And I even created an email address called history@allmysportssa.com for people to send their stories. So I'm already on that journey, definitely, because we need to record the history of what's happened in South Africa. The ultimate goal is to journal across the different race categories what's happened in sport, because sport lived in silos in apartheid. And part of the document that I want to put together is how sport is, how through the different silos people have changed, and how we've grown as a society to where sport was unified in from 1990 to 1997, and the impact that has had on various codes of sport across the spectrum. So definitely, yes, it's a work in progress that I've already started, unbeknownst that you'd even raise it. But definitely, it's something that needs to happen. So what's left for me to say is, Elvira, thank you for taking time out of your schedule in Lausanne. Your thoughts have been very, very interesting and thought-provoking. So thank you for your time. Christo, you and I have had, I wouldn't say too many conversations, but lots of conversations. And I'm sure there'll be lots more. We will debate and put things together, particularly a future feature on the case of sport, definitely, and link to that part of the foundation, talking about with yourself, Ray, and Marion, talking about the foundation and this what it does and how it's growing. Ray, as always, I was shocked actually to see that your hair was blow dried and not frizzy, you know. So,
the many faces of me, Elton.
you know, this is your academic face. So I'm grateful to see an academic face, you know. But thank you for being a leader to the youth, because definitely we need that, and we need positive role models. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. Definitely, Elvira, please do call again. We'd love to have you on, and definitely, potentially, we need to have a longer time slot, and not just an hour and a half. So look at your schedule, and definitely we'll. The same applies to your president and to yourself. You have an open door, as Ray will say, with enough warning, Ray, so we can plan at least a week or two in advance. Definitely, and even the conversation you and I had offline about the doing that's happening up north, we definitely want to cover that at some point in the near future. So thank you everybody for being part of it. Zalda says, great speakers, very interesting topics. So to the three of you, thank you very much for your time. For everybody that's watched, we appreciate your attendance, and we hope that you've learned at least 5 things of the many things that people have said here tonight. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. Goodbye.
Thank you very much for your hospitality. Thank you. And to your success with your program.
Thank you,
An excellent program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.